Hello, friends. Today we're going to be taking a look at our first rhetorical analysis, which was the 2010 prompt with Benjamin Banneker and Thomas Jefferson. For this, please make sure that you have your essay out in front of you, the prompt, and your black and blue pens. So the first is, you'll notice at the top of your page, you either have a 1, a 2, or a 3, or in some cases, multiple numbers. Those numbers correspond to the three-step process that we have been talking about since September. So if you have a 1 on your paper, it means we need to take a closer look at how we are reading and annotating the prompt and text. A 2 means we need to take a look at the outline that you created or didn't create. And 3, we need to look and re-examine your introduction strategy. Okay, let's start with reading and annotating the prompt. Here is the prompt in front of us, and it is a little bit different than the question 3, the argument. So we need to really annotate this and look at the information that's being given to us just in the prompt. So you can see that I've annotated a couple of things. We've got Benjamin Banneker, the son of former slaves, Thomas Jefferson, the framer of the Declaration of Independence, and then we've got exactly what he's saying here, how Banneker uses rhetorical strategies to argue against slavery. So just from the prompt, we have the speaker, we have some ethos about Benjamin Banneker. We know he is the son of former slaves. We know he's well educated. His purpose, we have the evidence, and we have, the audience, which is Thomas Jefferson, and we have some of Thomas Jefferson's ethos. He's the framer of the Declaration. And then we also have the exigence. Notice that this was written in 1791, 15 years after the Declaration of Independence was signed. That is going to be of the utmost importance later on when we write our essay. Okay, let's take a look at the first paragraph here. And what I want you to do is, if I have something that's marked on mine that you don't have marked on yours, I'd like you to please use your blue pen to mark it. Okay, the first thing that I noticed, lines 2 through 4, the arms and tyranny of the British crown were exerted with every powerful effort in order to reduce you to a state of servitude. He's saying, hey, Thomas Jefferson, remember when British were ruling the colonies? And he even uses the word state of servitude, and that is no accident. Down at the bottom, lines 12 through 15, notice his use of these connotative words: freedom, tranquility, mercifully received, blessing of heaven. These are all very, very positive connotative words. And then last but not least, if you haven't noticed, Benjamin Banneker writes in very, very long sentences. Each one of these paragraphs is about one sentence long. His use of commas and semicolons are grammatically correct. Please do not assume that he's just willy-nilly throwing mud at a wall. He's using run-on sentences. These are not run-on sentences. These are grammatically correct with perfect punctuation. And that says something about his intelligence, that he can craft and expertly craft these long sentences. All right, paragraph 2. The first I've noticed is lines 15 to 17. And he's saying, look, the injustice of a state of slavery in which you had just apprehensions of the horrors of its condition. So he's showing, hey, listen, you said that, Mr. Jefferson, you said that this taxation without representation, what England was doing to you was, quote, slavery, and that was bad. However, what you're saying, Thomas Jefferson, is actual slavery is okay. That's being a hypocrite. Down here, lines 21 to 25, notice that he quotes very, very specifically some words here. He says, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Now, why does he use that specific phrase? Because that is the second paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, which was written by Thomas Jefferson. In essence, Benjamin Banneker is using his words against him, again, calling him a hypocrite. And again, if you haven't noticed here, we have it 3 times on this page alone, and we have it almost in every single, the beginning of every single sentence. He refers to Thomas Jefferson as sir. And again, this contributes to his polite and respectful tone, which we're going to look at a little bit later on. Excuse me, I'm still recovering from my sickness. Here is the third paragraph. Notice in lines 32 to 34, we have the appeal to authority. He's saying, quote, the benevolence of the father of mankind. And then look at these negatively connotated words. He uses the word fraud, violence, groaning captivity, cruel oppression, Those words are in stark contrast to the words that he used in paragraph 1. These are highly negative. And then again, look at this, lines 39 to 41. You should, at the same time, be found guilty of that most criminal act which you professedly detested in others with respect for yourself. Look, man, this is very, very direct. You cannot get more direct than these 3 lines. He is literally, openly calling Thomas Jefferson a hypocrite. And then here we go. We've got the top line here. Essentially, hey, I don't need to tell you of the extensive damage of my brethren here. We know that Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. We know that he also forced one of his slaves, Sally Hemings, to be his wife when she was 14. And Sally Hemings fathered 3 of his children. Thomas Jefferson had exact firsthand, quote, knowledge of the situation. Even if you don't bring in Sally Hemings into this, you know that Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. He supported slavery, and yet he said all men are created equal. So he knows, Thomas Jefferson knows the extent of the conditions that slaves are forced to live in. These last 2 lines are a real zinger too. Thus shall you need neither the direction of myself or others in what manner to proceed herein, lines 52 to 53. So Benjamin Banneker presents his argument in such a logical way, and that is, you didn't like it when others force something on you, you shouldn't force slavery on others. He presents it in such a logical way that Thomas Jefferson should see no other solution than to end slavery. And then also, please make sure that you're reading the footnotes here. In line 48, we have Job with a number 2. And then if you don't know who Job is, down at the bottom, Job is a righteous man who endures much suffering. So this is an allusion to a story from the Bible. Thomas Jefferson would have read that story a million times. He knew that story. And so Benjamin Banneker is saying, hey, Thomas Jefferson, you need to have empathy, like the Bible tells you to do. Okay, so let's take a look and let's kind of recap some of the things that we talked about. And remember space cat, right? Speaker, purpose, audience, context, exigence for space, and then choices, appeals, tones for cat. So essentially, I'm not expecting you to be able to write this in the 5 minutes you have to annotate, but these first 3, the speaker, purpose, and audience, we found that just from the prompt. Okay, and the same thing with the exigence. Just looking at that time frame, 1791, that should be setting off alarms in our head. It was published 15 years after the signing of the Independence, the Declaration, and then Jefferson said all men are created equal. That does not compute. And then if we were to spend 15 minutes in listing out all the choices and the appeals and the tones, we would have something that looked like this. And I'm showing you this so if you get stuck in your writing, you have something to fall back on, and you can use this to revise your writing. So as far as choices are, we talked about the use of sir, the use of long sentences, the direct quotes of the Declaration of Independence. In the appeals, we talked about the appeal to authority, the reference to Job. And the tone, and again, this goes back to his use of sir. That's kind of giving respect to the title and to his authority. However, we cannot get away from the fact that Benjamin Banneker is quite brazen, right? He knows his own position. He's a free black during 1791. And he knows Thomas Jefferson's position as authority. And yet he blatantly calls out him for his hypocrisy. Okay, that's what we have for step 1. Now let's go on to step 2. Okay, using what we have, let's jot down a couple of things that we could turn into claims and some evidence of where we found it in the article. Okay, so we know that Benjamin Banneker's letter comes at a very auspicious time. We know that it's 15 years after the Declaration. Slavery is still legal. We know that Banneker demonstrates his intelligence and eloquence. We think about the expectations of, quote, free blacks at the time. He held all those professions. He was an author. He used long, grammatically correct sentences. He also used Jefferson's words against him. We know these truths to be self-evident. Quote, we have the knowledge of the slavery, the situation, etc. Number 4, he uses references to religion to appeal to what is good, right? That idea of Job. And then 5, his tone teeters between having a respectful and assertive tone. He calls Thomas Jefferson sir. However, he openly accuses him of being guilty. Again, am I expecting you to jot these down in 30 seconds? No. But what I am expecting you to do is, after you annotate, create these short sentences, like you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that can later become your claims. So, for example, look at number 1. Benjamin Banneker's letter comes at a very auspicious time. That's a claim. And then the lower number 1 and 2, I'm using that as evidence to support my claim. Okay, so there's no way you're going to do this in 30 seconds, but what would a 30-second outline really look like? On the left, I have 2 examples of ineffective outlines: ethos, hypocrite, tone; exigence, appeals, diction. That says nothing about what you're going to be writing. That says nothing about your claim. So essentially, you want to write an effective outline. Take a look at the outline on the top right. Instead of saying ethos, you might put down Banneker is eloquent and educated. Instead of saying hypocrite, you might say, Banneker uses Jefferson's words against him. Instead of saying tone, you could say his tone is assertive yet respectful. So when you're writing and you write your first body paragraph about him being eloquent and educated, having this massive ethos, then you say, okay, what else was I going to write about? Oh, yeah, that's right, how he used his words against him. These are going to be kind of references. The word hypocrite, the word tone is not going to do it for you. Same thing with the bottom right. Instead of saying exigence, you want to say something like letter is timely. Instead of appeals, maybe appeals to religious figures or religious anecdotes. And then diction, you might say, uses heavily connotative words. Okay, now let's get into choosing an introduction strategy. So as you remember, there are 7 strategies that we've talked about in class. Now, I've also said that when you are choosing an introduction strategy, you want to choose one that is right for your writing style and for the type of essay that you are composing. Not all introduction strategies are going to fit with every essay. So for rhetorical analysis, I would actually avoid using rhetorical question, because we've already talked about why. Avoid using anecdote, and avoid addressing the counter argument. I just don't think that those 3 strategies fit with rhetorical analysis. So that leaves you broad to narrow, relevant statement, using a quote, and making an analogy. I have 4 paragraphs that I'm going to show you that demonstrate these 4 strategies. It is my hope that in seeing them, you'll be able to kind of jog your memory on what they look like and be able to craft your own. Let's take a look at broad to narrow first. I will read this out loud because I want you to hear how the narrative moves from very broad down to very narrow. Here we go. It's incredulous. And by the way, this is not a perfect introduction. I jotted this down in maybe 3 or 4 minutes. There are things that I'm looking at, I'm like, oh man, I would definitely change. But given the time constraints, I wanted you to see what this looked like. It's incredulous to think that slavery is still legal in certain areas of the world. Many countries, including the United States, have recognized and abolished such practices. Yet, when the United States was founded on the principles of the Declaration of Independence, slavery was still a part of everyday life. The great irony, however, lies in the fact that Thomas Jefferson, the framer of the Declaration, owned, as well as married, raped, and had children by, slaves. Benjamin Banneker, the son of former slaves, recognized this hypocrisy and blatantly pointed out this fact to Jefferson. Banneker uses his unique disposition, his education, and other rhetorical strategies in his impassioned letter to argue against slavery. Again, is this perfect? No. So if you look at the first sentence, areas of the world, that's my very broad terminology. Then I'm moving into many countries. Then I'm moving into the United States was founded, who framed the Declaration, Thomas Jefferson, and then getting into my thesis, Banneker argues against slavery. Okay, let's take a look at relevant statement. And again, most of this introduction is the same. What I'm changing here is just the hook. So relevant statement. Many children can recall a time when a parent has told them, do as I say, not as I do. This mantra is usually reserved when one forgets to use a turn signal and there's a novice driver in the car. Thomas Jefferson, however, took this colloquialism to a new level. In the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson claimed all men are created equal, yet he himself, and it goes on from there. So notice here this idea of do as I say, not as I do, and how that fits into Thomas Jefferson saying all men are created equal but then doing something completely else. So that's a relevant statement. Use a quote, and you notice relevant statement and quote. This relevant statement could be a quote, but I think that do as I say, not as I do is not really a direct quote. I think it's more of a mantra for a relevant statement. Use a quote. 5 of the most influential words in all of American history are, quote, all men are created equal. They are embedded in the very opening lines of the Declaration of Independence, a document credited to be penned by Thomas Jefferson. The irony, however, lies in the fact that Jefferson himself owned slaves. Okay, and again, look at how I'm embedding that quote into my own original sentence. Now, all men are created equal does not necessarily need to have an in-text citation for 2 reasons. 1, it's used in the actual article that you're given. And 2, these are infamous words that everyone knows. You do not need to cite them. The other thing, too, I want you to keep in mind is everyone who does this prompt has access to that quote. So I would use a bit of caution if you are going to use that quote as your quote, use the quote, because many, many other students are going to use the same thing. Last one, make an analogy. Imagine if Congressman Jones helps pass a law to raise taxes for every person in America, but conveniently exempts himself from that very tax hike. Hopefully, someone will be brazen enough to raise a red flag. This exact situation or scenario unfolded in 1791, 15 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Yet the issue was not taxes, it was slavery. Thomas Jefferson, the framer of the Declaration, yada, yada, yada. So if you look at here, I'm making an analogy. I'm raising taxes for everyone except myself versus I'm saying all men are created equal except the fact that I own slaves, right? So we're pointing out the hypocrisy here, making an analogy. Is it a perfect analogy? No. Okay, but hopefully looking at those 4 examples will kind of help you see how that can be interpreted. Now, in terms of your body paragraphs, you want to begin with a short, defensible claim. Avoid using those big $10 words like ethos or pathos or syntax. So a good short claim would be something like, in his letter, Banneker remains polite yet stern. Or Banneker reminds Jefferson of well-known religious anecdotes. Those are claims that you can then support with evidence. After your claim, you want to set up or embed your textual evidence. You have to use lines from the article. Make sure those quotes, especially Banneker's, because he uses these long sentences, make sure your quotes are less than 25 words that include line numbers. Then the rest of your body paragraphs should provide an analysis. Show your reader how your evidence supports your claim. Walk your reader through step by step, okay? All right, your assignment for today, and if you haven't done this yet, please do this today and get this into me. So open up a new Google document, name it as such, and then use the prompt, use your previous rhetorical analysis attempt, and the notes from the session. I want you to compose an introduction, which includes a thesis and one body paragraph that begins with a claim, has specific textual evidence, and provides a thorough analysis of how the 2 are connected. So you're writing an introduction and a body paragraph. Please submit as a PDF or a docx, and then due by the end of class. But if you're watching this, you were not here. So submit it as soon as you can. All right, again, any questions, please let me know. Thanks.